Good day, everyone. I am Angela Burns, Information Officer with the Department of Information and Public Relations. Welcome to this GIS report. Today, we are going to talk about Diplomatic Week 2025 with the International Affairs Secretariat. We have a very special guest with us, and we'll be talking with her in just a minute. Welcome back. Today we are pleased to have with us as our very special guest on this GIS report, Ms. Dwinelle Davis, who is the Acting Director of the International Affairs Secretariat. Ms. Davis, welcome.
Thank you, Angela. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Today we are here to inform the viewing public about your department, International Affairs Secretariat. Who are you?
Thank you so much for the question, Angela. And I hope I do it justice by describing the functions of the International Affairs Secretariat. So the International Affairs Secretariat is essentially the Virgin Islands de facto Ministry of Foreign Affairs or State Department for Foreign or External Affairs.
When you talk about external affairs, what do you mean?
External affairs basically refers to any interaction that happens in the international arena, anything that happens outside. So it doesn't refer to things that happen locally, but anything that happens in the global space, so that whether it be regionally or internationally. So any interaction that's within that space.
What do we mean interaction? Things like what? Meetings?
Yeah, so things like meetings, things like bilateral relationships, things like multilateral engagement, anything between country to country, country to major organization, the international affairs would facilitate interactions of the Virgin Islands on the global stage.
Okay, when you say global stage now, the U.S. Virgin Islands is right next door. Does that involve such activities as well?
It does indeed. The United States Virgin Islands is actually one of our biggest bilateral relationships. So you might be aware, or the public might be aware, that we usually have something called the Inter-Virgin Islands Council. And the Inter-Virgin Islands Council is basically the bilateral mechanism that was set up by both the government of the Virgin Islands and the government of the other Virgin Islands to bring together a forum where we could discuss matters where we can work collaboratively, or where we can discuss matters where we have a difference of opinion or a different viewpoint on different things. And this is the forum where we come to elaborate, discuss, continue to live as, neighbors, family, however you choose to phrase it.
Okay. Now, the International Affairs Secretariat, I perhaps should have asked you this at the beginning, under whose portfolio does the IAS fall?
That's a very interesting question. So the International Affairs Secretariat falls under the portfolio of the Premier's Office. And I'm just going to provide a bit of context here. So because the Virgin Islands is still on the United Nations list of non-self-governing territories, that just basically means we're not independent. We have an administering power, which is the United Kingdom. We're not allowed to, or we should not carry on external affairs in our own right. That is the responsibility of the administering power. Now, Section 60, subsection 5 of the Virgin Islands Constitution Order, which is the governor's special responsibilities, gives the Virgin Islands a special carve-out for us to carry on and conduct external affairs in our own right. So, for example, the Virgin Islands can carry on and conduct external affairs matters in anything that's tourism related, anything that's financial services related, anything that's tax related, our relationships with multilateral organizations, so our relationship with OECS or relationship with the Association of Caribbean States. So any regional body that the Virgin Islands is a part of, the Constitution gives us this carve-out to carry on external affairs in our own right. Yeah, so I just wanted to add on to say that in keeping with the duties outlined in Section 60, subsection 5 of the Constitution, that is where the International Affairs Secretariat comes into play, because we're the government department that is responsible for coordinating the territory's external affairs in the areas of carve-out in the Constitution. So right now, the Constitution basically says that it's a delegated minister and it's a responsibility that's delegated to the Premier. So I know a lot of people think that the International Affairs Secretariat only services the Premier's office, but the reality of the situation is that the Premier would be equivalent to our foreign minister, and he would be the minister with responsibility for external affairs. So the International Affairs Secretariat is a department that works cross-ministerial, cross-departmental, and it's cross-sectorial.
Excellent. Now, you have been involved, obviously, in some major activities. Would you care to explain to us some of those activities that you've been involved in so that the public can understand the role even more clearly of the International Affairs Secretariat?
Sure. So usually the public would be advised when the Premier travels on official business. So part of the responsibilities of the International Affairs Secretariat is to help in the preparation for the Premier to get to regional and international meetings. So let's take, for example, if Premier is traveling to CARICOM heads meeting, the responsibility of the International Affairs Secretariat is to review and revise the agenda, the topics that come up for discussion, and provide briefing information so that when the Premier gets to these meetings, he's just not talking off the top of his head. The research has actually been done, and it's IAS's responsibility to reach out to ministries and departments who are the technical facilitators of information. What they would do is the technical people could tell you exactly what the territory's position is, right? So at the international affairs level, my duty isn't really to know that information in depth because I'm not technical. My responsibility is to ensure that the minister has the requisite information that he needs to advocate for the Virgin Islands or to put the Virgin Islands position on the table. Another part of our responsibilities also come along with protocol. So my department would be responsible for facilitating ministers' travel on official business. So what that essentially means is if the Premier is traveling again to a CARICOM heads meeting, my department is responsible for communicating to every place that he will transit, to every country that he will be in, to say, my head of government is in your country. Please extend courtesies. It's also a security mechanism, noting the level of person that the head of government would be. So this is me communicating with, let's say, Trinidad and Tobago to say, I'm from the Virgin Islands. My head of government is in your country. Please afford to him any courtesies that are afforded to him at his level. So that is part of that. Those are the primary responsibilities of the International Affairs Secretariat, to assist the territory and promote the territory's interests in the global and international arena. And that also comes along with the byproduct of protocol.
Excellent. And when you talk about protocol and external affairs and all of that, there's some diplomacy that comes into play for sure. And then we are coming up now to the international observation of Diplomatic Week. And we are observing that here in the Virgin Islands. Let's zero in on that.
For the very first time.
For the very first time.
We will be embarking on a journey to host a diplomatic week. So in the international arena, a diplomatic week or a diplomatic event of this nature is usually where diplomats get together to speak about what real world problems and propose solutions for handling those problems. The topics that are usually, or the topics that a diplomatic week would usually cover are anything that is like sustainable development related. Right. So they would go towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. They'll talk about things like climate diplomacy. There's also things like cultural diplomacy. Like a diplomatic week could essentially cover a vast area. So what I've recognized as my time as director is that quite a lot of people are not really aware of how important international relations is. And I stress that international relations is important because the BVI is not living in the world by itself. We are part of a global world. And I think sometimes when people hear about the International Affairs Secretariat, the question, well, what do you really do? And there's not a real understanding of international relations. That's the way that we communicate and the way that we purport and show ourselves to the world, or they don't understand diplomacy, which is usually the nuances about how you communicate and do different things in the international space. So this diplomatic week, the thought was to essentially use it as a public education campaign to bring the public along, just to give the public some awareness about how important international relations is. I also want to double and say that international relations is so significant to every aspect of your life that it's an understatement. I can't even put into words how significant it really is. Okay. So just by way of an example, we would have gone through the Commission of Inquiry about 3 years ago. And at a time where we were saying, you know, the way the UK handled the situation, it wasn't a nice situation. The only people that we could have run to were our friends in CARICOM, our friends in OECS, and you would note that several press statements went out saying that CARICOM and both OECS supported BVI. So that is the importance of international relationships. Yeah. When I am in trouble, who is my brother that's coming to rescue me? And it's that type of reciprocity we have in international engagements or in engagements generally. Okay. Right? So, Diplomatic Week this year.
Before you go on to the activities or anything, now, for the person who is watching who doesn't know who is a diplomat, do we have diplomats here in the Virgin Islands?
Of course we do.
Who is a diplomat?
A diplomat is essentially a government representative, and that person would represent the government before other governments or to multilateral organizations. So, again, OECS, CARICOM, even the United Nations. Again, the Director for International Affairs is a diplomat. The Premier, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, is a diplomat. We have a London office. The representative of the London office is a diplomat. We have an office in Asia. The representative of the office in Asia. They're all diplomats because we all represent the interests of the Virgin Islands.
Excellent. So we're having Diplomatic Week coming up when?
Diplomatic Week is slated to be celebrated between October 18th and 25th, 2025.
What is the idea? It's the first time that the Virgin Islands is observing in Diplomatic Week. What is the idea? Why do you think it's important for us to do so?
Well, not just that it's important, but I think that this Diplomatic Week is quite meaningful because it's happening in the midst of diplomatic related activities. Okay. So this year, the USVI will host Friendship Day from the 18th to the 19th of October, our closest bilateral relationship with the United States Virgin Islands. So we start off the week actually going to the USVI to participate in the Friendship Day activities. We then come back and we celebrate Heroes and For Parents Day, and then we go into the Premier hosting the UK Caribbean Overseas Territories Caucus. Again, another diplomatic engagement. Yes. These are all United Kingdom overseas territories located in the Caribbean getting together to discuss issues that are very relevant to them. Also, in the lead up to the OT Leaders Caucus, we actually have a welcome reception. And as part of the welcome reception, the Premier, in honor of Heroes and For Parents Day, would honor persons who have made significant contributions to the Virgin Islands in the international relations and diplomacy space. Then after that, we move into the caucus session the next day where leaders will discuss pressing issues to them. And we have a panel discussion later that evening that focuses on the importance of international relations for overseas territories. It talks, or we would hope to speak about how overseas territories represent their interests in the global arena, primarily because noting that we're not self-governing and mentioning before that the UK retains the responsibility for your external affairs. I hope that the panel discussion would highlight how overseas territories conduct para-diplomacy. So there's the interest of the UK, but there's also the individual interest of each overseas territory and how they go about engaging in the international space.
So those are the activities for Diplomatic Week. Let's talk about the organization of it. It sounds like a mammoth task. How are you going about organizing it and making sure that the first event is going to be very effective and memorable and impactful?
Well, it actually is a mammoth of a task, and I just also must point out that International Affairs only has 2 members of staff. So It is indeed a mammoth of a task. But right now we're basically in the midst of coordinating for Friendship Day, and Friendship Day is a little bit less of a stress, and that's because the USVI is hosting. So our task at this point is only to bring a delegation, participate probably in the agenda setting phase. So they would have aspects where we'd need somebody to sing the territorial song, and they would have somebody to sing their national song. So it's just picking persons here or there to participate in particular events. Now, the first of its kind, this year Friendship Day also has a friendly basketball game between the USVI and the BVI. So the brunt of my work, or the work of the International Affairs Secretariat, is basically organizing a basketball team, transporting persons from the public. We issued an invitation to ask persons from the public, if you'd like to attend, please register with us, and facilitating the transportation of persons to attend the basketball game. So that's the brunt of the work that we're doing, but it's not too heavy. It's just a bit of logistical details right now.
Excellent. You sound like you have a great handle of the International Affairs Secretariat, and that's a good thing if you're the director, right? So now tell us finally, what does the IAS, the International Affairs Secretariat, hope to happen as a result of hosting Diplomatic Week for the first time?
Well, there's a lot to be done in the international affairs space. But I hope that this Diplomatic Week will, one, garner interest for persons to study international relations and diplomacy. That's why I view it as a public education campaign to say, hi, I know persons pretty much only prefer traditional degrees, or they prefer stuff in the arts, but international relations and diplomacy, it is a very vibrant and dynamic field. It's a real field, and I think that anybody working in the field will be very much satisfied. I also hope to create the precedent that we will continue to celebrate Diplomatic Week as the years go by.
Excellent. To round off now then, can you just give us a brief recap for those who have never heard about the International Affairs Secretariat? Pitch your department and tell us about Diplomatic Week.
Okay, so the International Affairs Secretariat is essentially the government's mouthpiece in the international arena. We protect the Virgin Islands' interests, and we ensure that the Virgin Islands is adequately represented on the world stage. We also provide protocol services to and on behalf of the government of the Virgin Islands. Moving into Diplomatic Week is the first of its kind. We have quite a few activities planned, and we hope that we would be able to reach a wide cross-section of the public to understand international relations. When people see Premier traveling, I hope what I stop hearing is, why is he wasting the government's money? Right? So the work that we do, it is really important work, and I hope that the public begins to glean, why it is that important.
Excellent. We'd love to hear more as time progresses in terms of the International Affairs Secretariat and the important work that you do. Ms. Dwinelle Davis, Acting Director of the International Affairs Secretariat, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Angela. It was an immense pleasure.
This has been a GIS report. I am Angela Burns from the Department of Information and Public Relations. Thank you for watching.